Welcome back to another episode. I don't know that most of you know, or even in the area to hear, that I do a segment on South Dakota Public Broadcasting once a month. The show's called In the Moment, and the host is Lori Walsh, who is a phenomenal interviewer. She is so super engaged in the topic, and I have just really delighted in our on-air, our off-air conversations. So usually her producer will ask me, what would you like to talk on? And typically I'll select something around a recent column that I've written to that can be linked to, and expand on the emotional aspect of that as much as possible. But every once in a while, they ask me to address something. So in a recent segment, they asked me to address the emotions around student loan forgiveness, especially for those who had no debt or did not qualify for such programs. And it was interesting because I did some immediate reflection. I think maybe I found that out a couple days ahead of time. And it's nothing I've ever written anything on. So as I told them, we created the column on the air because there was no column written for them to link to. And I thought it was interesting. You know, oftentimes when I am pondering a topic, I go into it with doing some research on it, and I begin writing. And I somewhat think through my fingertips as I'm writing. And I can't tell you how many times I've gotten done writing something and I have the reaction, I didn't know that I believed that. So some of that was with this particular topic. And I don't, so what I want to do is in that segment, I got right into the emotional responses to seeing someone else's debt forgiven. But I thought, since I had a little more time, it might be interesting to give you a little background on student loan debt forgiveness. And I know to those of you that are not in the U.S., this may be a little on the boring side. It could be on the boring side if you do live in the U.S. But student loans are so common in the United States. I don't know what percent of students put themselves through college by borrowing, but it's a significant amount. I've had clients, more than one client, that had over $200,000 of student loan debt. And it can take a long time to get that debt paid off, literally decades. So during the pandemic, President Biden did some debt forgiveness on various types of student loans. And I'm not going to get into this. I'm looking at a list of all the student loans, and it's just alphabet soup. But what I want to say is, as of March of 2023, and that's the most recent data I could find, over 500,000 people were forgiven $34.3 billion in student loan debt, which amounted to just about $69,000 a person. So that's pretty significant. The president also came up with another plan to forgive student loan debt, where he wanted to cancel up to $20,000 in student loan per person, per borrower. And this was challenged, taken to the Supreme Court, and in June of 2023, the Supreme Court blocked that ruling on a 6-3 vote. It appears to me some people did get some relief before it was blocked, but not very many. The estimates were, had that gone through, just under 39 million people would have benefited from it, which would have included people that borrowed on what's called a Pell Grant. And their estimates were that about 90% of debt forgiveness dollars would go to borrowers making under $75,000 a year. The Biden administration since then has come up with another plan to erase just under $40 billion in student loan for those who borrowed on an income-driven repayment plan. It's called the IDR plan, income-driven repayment. And the payments on the loan are set to your income. So irregardless of what the interest rate is and what the amortization payment, usually if you borrow money over 20 years, there's a set payment that will pay off the principal and the interest over those 20 years. But in this case, it's all tied to income. So if you didn't have enough income to even meet the payment, the interest rate would just be added to the loan and it would be pushed ahead. Obviously, to a borrower that had a low income, it could have taken 20, 25 years, even longer, to try and pay off these plans. In some cases, if your income was low enough, you would never pay off the loan. So that one is currently progressing. I understand it is not going to take a act of Congress to authorize that plan, as would the plan that was turned down by the Supreme Court. So that's a little bit of the specifics on the debt forgiveness that's going on. There's all sorts of ways to get debt forgiveness on a number of other plans. There's a public service loan forgiveness, which forgives the remaining balance of a federal student loan for a borrower who works full-time for the government. And you have to work at least 10 years and make 120 payments. There's a teacher loan forgiveness plan where a teacher can get forgiveness of up to $5,000 in student loan debt if they work or teach for more than 5 consecutive years. And on it goes. So that's some of the financial specifics. If you have a student loan, you may want to check into or refresh your memory on potential ways that you can get some forgiveness in your loan. But it does have to be a federal program. A private student loan, of course, would not qualify. So what about the person then who never borrowed money to pay off their college debt, who worked their way through college? And we've talked about this before on the podcast, that according to a Berkeley study, students who work their way through college have a 0.2% higher GPA than students who are given a full ride. And they tend to study more than students who are given a full ride. I don't know if in that full ride there was any borrowing of money or not. But nevertheless, students can work pretty hard to put themselves through college with no debt. And those that have the luxury of parents paying for it are even more blessed, but not in GPA. So if you're one of those students and you have worked diligently to make sure you didn't have student debt, what are the emotions? What is the experience when you see hundreds of thousands of others that did borrow, getting some type, maybe all, of their student loan debt forgiven? Well, I came up with about 10 different emotions that I think a person can feel, and some of these may be surprising to you. The first one is happiness. And this is all on the part of the person who paid off or did not borrow. They could just be genuinely happy for those whose debt has been forgiven. Happy that their well-being is being improved. Happy that this is even viewed as a societal win, even if it's not a personal one, by freeing up people to be able to save more and spend more. The second emotion that could come up around this is one of generosity. Some folks are just really inspired to help other people. I think of the Enneagram Type 2 that really is in service to helping other people and helping them improve their lives. So to look at this and view it as an act of kindness and generosity, supporting the policies that are eliminating the struggles of people that are bound with this type of debt, can just fill them with a lot of generosity. It could make them, in itself, it doesn't make them do anything, but it could lead to them feeling proud about the government spending, the taxes that they pay that may or may not contribute to that. The third emotion is one of empathy. So even if someone has never faced student loan debt, a person can still have a lot of empathy, a deep compassion for those who are benefiting from the loan forgiveness. They could just really get how much relief that it can bring to those individuals and their families, especially if they're struggling to make those payments every month. Another emotion would be sympathy. Just feeling sympathy, recognizing the challenges that people face accumulating a debt, especially those that are, say, low income, and where their debt actually grows every month when they're on one of those income replacement plans. And just really being happy, grateful to see their hardships eased. So those are the more, I hate to call any emotion, positive or negative, because emotions just are. But those are the lighter emotions that I can see evoked by witnessing someone else's debt forgiveness. And for some of you, like I said, this may have been surprising to you, because I have a hunch that there's a subset of you that probably went to more difficult emotions around this. So let's take a look at some of those. The fifth one would be insecurity. So debt forgiveness of another person can stir feelings of lack of security, especially if that person made different financial choices or had fewer opportunities because of the debt that they took on. They could easily second guess their own decisions and why did they take on this debt, and wondering, what, or being very cognizant of what they missed out on potentially had they not taken the debt. If they had not taken that debt, and that this could have opened up more doors for them, especially when a portion of it gets repaid, right? I mean, basically that can be viewed as free money. So those insecure feelings, if you're part of those, like kind of beating yourself up, why did I work so hard? Why did I make sacrifices to not accumulate debt? And here's somebody else didn't make those sacrifices, and they won, so to speak. Those are definitely very valid emotions. It's not I'm sure there's a critical part that could step up and say, well, you shouldn't be feeling this way. You shouldn't be looking at the past. Let bygones be bygones. It's water under the bridge. But I just want to say, if you can relate to that, it's perfectly normal to feel a sense of unfairness when we see others receive assistance that we didn't receive, that we potentially even rejected ourselves. A sixth emotion could be, in a way, no emotion at all. Indifference. Not everybody is going to have a strong reaction to debt forgiveness, one way or the other. Not light feelings of happiness, not dark feelings of maybe resentment. Some folks just don't care, and I don't mean that they should care. They just don't care. They don't have a reaction. I think this would be especially true if they've never been personally touched by student loan debt, or don't know anybody who is struggling with student loan debt. It's just a non-event to them. The seventh emotion is, which I just referred to, one of resentment. And this is an emotion that I know personally quite well. For those of you, again, familiar with the Enneagram, being a type 1, the passion, what a type 1 struggles with is resentment. It's a form of anger turned inward. So for this person who really struggled, they worked 20 hours a week to get the money to pay their student tuition, to pay their housing. They didn't go to a lot of the social activities. They really made a sacrifice to get through college and very potentially viewed those who did obtain loans as possibly taking the easy way out, maybe being slackers. For whatever reason, there's can be a little bit of a moral high ground. And I'm not taking away that there's satisfaction in doing that. But in viewing others now who took that easy way out, and again, from their viewpoint, and went ahead and borrowed the debt, and now a portion or all of it's being paid off. They could view that as getting a free pass. And that resentment can really build. And again, it's understandable that a person would feel resentment. It could also be helpful to consider that loan forgiveness is a really well-intentioned policy designed to help people who have been overburdened for a lot of years. But that alone may not really wipe out the resentment. It also may not help that there is a upside to have never had that debt. And it's very possible that the person who didn't borrow actually may be ahead financially further than someone who did borrow, that they've been able to have the opportunity to save before others have. I kind of digress in throwing some logic in there because it really doesn't matter. If a person's feeling resentment, that's what they're feeling, and it's very valid. An eighth emotion that could come up would be jealousy and envy. And this can arrive when when we compare ourselves to others, and we're looking at, once again, at the financial struggles that I may have gone through to not borrow. And then we compare it to people who, again, decided to borrow and are being rewarded for that decision. I mean, it could have been that a person worked their whole high school years to save money and then use that to pay for college. The other person maybe worked to save money too, but borrowed it all. And when the debt is paid off, the view can be, well, they were money ahead. I wouldn't have had to work this hard. So they can end up having envy for those who received the assistance and really wished that they could have received similar help. Another emotion can be confusion. Some people may not really know how they feel. They could just be numb, potentially. It just may be a lot to process. They can have a lot of different emotions around it, which, quite frankly, is pretty normal. I don't think that there's probably anybody who may feel any of these emotions just singularly. Typically, we will have a part of us that feels happy for them and a part of us that's really angry that they received that. So while this can be perceived as confusion, and there can be internal messages, it's what's wrong with me. I don't know whether to be happy or sad. I have parts of me that see it both ways, and another part that's resentful. That is perfectly normal. And it's important just to let all those parts of you that are feeling that you get it. It makes sense. When you further understand why they're happy, why they're sad, why they're resentful, it typically makes a lot of sense. And the final emotion, which may be the first emotion in these days of nationwide polarization in the U.S., is political or ideological alignment. That means you could have a reaction to this that align with your political or ideological beliefs. So some people support student loan forgiveness because they think it's an important step to economic equality. And in so doing, it addresses inequality in the system. In the U.S., those would tend to be more left-leaning or liberal-leaning people. Others could oppose it because they believe it's unfair to taxpayers. This is not where I want my tax dollars going. They could look at it as a handout and have a moral a component to it. I'm trying to think of the right word, to where this will encourage people to borrow more. Like, heck, let me go ahead and borrow. I see everybody getting their debt paid off. Maybe down the road I'll get lucky too. Why should I have to work so hard when there's a good chance that the government's going to pay off my debt? So those are very real reactions. So, as with a lot of things, there's lots of different opinions around the topic of debt forgiveness. And I want to say it's more about emotions than it really is dollars. We've talked before about modern monetary theory and the fact if the debt is in dollars, the government can afford to pay it. And I probably shouldn't even wandered into that, but it's often, even with policies like this, not about the money. And sometimes we will make it about the money. But the emotions are so strong, you've got to step back and pause and say, is this really about the money? Especially when it's going down into resentment. So it's really important that we understand all of the emotions that can come with policy like this. And understanding all of those emotions, we went through 10, is really important if we're going to discuss things like this in a civil and informed manner and have any type of productive discussions as a country. So, okay, thanks for tuning in, and I look forward to speaking with you again next week. Take care.